have been doing like introductions and stuff, and I kind of like just getting in there. I was thinking about how you're one of my favorite friends. You want to know why, Aaron? You want to know why?
Hit me.
There's a lot of reasons. You orange pilled me to Bitcoin, which has been a game changer. We have very fun discussions about consciousness and how the universe works. And we're, super aligned, which is very encouraging to me that I'm not a weirdo. But you also refine my thinking on all of the above. But, and I'm also fascinated by what you've been doing since, really since high school when we knew each other initially. And love talking about that. And I love that we can talk about politics and not get all crazy, even though we may not agree on everything, which is kind of the whole point, a big point of this channel. Dignified discourse, baby.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot there. Well, first of all, it's like, isn't it strange that we're just living this life and we don't regularly think about consciousness, or we don't even regularly think about the fact that we all just showed up here and no one knows where we came from. That's weird, man. That's weird. I think it's scary to think about that.
It's so scary, or it can be super scary, right? I mean, I think one, unless you block it out, or two, you're just comfortable with the unknown that you don't know, which I think is probably superior. Dude, I was watching something. I woke up at like 2 a.m. last night and I couldn't get to sleep. And I turned on YouTube and watched some guy visiting. That's called the Kailasa Temple. It's somewhere in India. It was built all out of rock. It's super ornate. Supposedly, all they had were chisels back then. But it's like so detailed and so preserved, and it's rock that I guess you can't even chisel anyway because it's so dense. And yet it's this ornate temple with all these caves and all this artwork that is so detailed. And it's kind of like, man, something's weird about that. I mean, how did that get here? But then I start thinking about aliens and all that stuff.
Oh, aliens. Yes. Well, we don't know our history. You know, humans don't know their history, honestly, past 5,000 years. Really, we just don't. We have little hints and scripts. I mean, there's a lot there, but I think that's the general idea is that, and you can say, hey, well, human beings didn't start writing things down until, just even several thousand years ago. And that's true. But I think there's a lot of mystery there. I think, look, just being alive and being conscious is a mystery. And I think a lot of people would rather not talk about that. They would just rather run their program and then live life, which, by the way, that's great. I think that I could do more of that. There's a balance of being able to just like engage with the present moment, live life, enjoy, a piece of cake and just like have that experience and enjoy it and just look out at the sunset and just like take it in. Don't have to question it. And then to go to the other side of like, look, I'm all about asking questions.
Yeah.
Let's nothing is beyond reproach. We can always just ask and ask and ask. So
yeah, I definitely don't judge those who don't want to. I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of me thinks is like, if you believe it's all going to come to an understanding after you die, which I think I believe. I mean, I don't know evidence or whatnot of that, but I believe that. Then maybe this life is not to need. There's not a need to know that knowledge. It's coming. So why don't you just live your life and just understand what it means to be human and not know?
I do feel like there are other dimensions and realities that are happening concurrently right now outside of this. And to go with your point that outside of this lifetime or this reality, there's a lot more knowing for our consciousness versus we're just shrouded in forgetfulness here. And I think it's designed that way so that we can really bite down on this existence, like you say, really experience this, because we're so much greater than this, meat suit avatar that we're experiencing life with. And this limited look, our brain, our mind helps us out a lot here, but actually it's incredibly limited compared to what we are. So yeah, just we kind of walked into whatever you want to look at this as, but this is it's almost like a first person game if you want to look at it that way.
You see the Alan Watts book too. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but when I got the sign, I'm like, what else should I put in this shot? And I have a book by Alan Watts that I just got in the mail. I think the whole idea for me is to have things that mean something to me in the background. And Alan Watts is a big teacher when it comes to my understanding of a lot of the things we talk about, to include right now.
Hey, what's in the middle behind you below the radical metal neon? What's that?
That's a artwork. A guy who was doing Mastodon in the form of South Park characters.
Very cool.
So another thing that means a lot to me, which might sound cheesy and weird to have a band mean so much to you, but they really do. So they're part of the set.
Yeah. What would you say is Mastodon your all-time favorite band?
Oh yeah, by far.
Dude, that's awesome. And so when we knew each other well in high school, I mean, that band was Metallica for you. So Metallica's got to be top 5 for you still?
Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer.
Yeah, that's right. Megadeth. Dave Mustaine. That's cool.
Dave Mustaine.
Slayer. Yeah.
So I mean, with you, I feel like that's what's so fun. Being your friend is we can talk about so many different things, and it's just fascinating to me. And I love to get your insights on it. When we were texting earlier, you mentioned I don't know if we want to jump right in or not.
Let's do it.
But I do love, you mentioned the end of wokeism, and I also have been musing a little bit on the end of identity politics, which good. I think is related or the same thing maybe. But I haven't quite formed my thoughts, so that might be a good discussion.
Okay, so what is wokeism to you? Because everyone's gonna have a slightly different answer.
I think woke started as a good, positive term, meaning.
Do you remember when it was a positive term? I remember it was like 2018. I remember I would hear like Gen Z be like, "That was woke," and it was actually had a positive connotation to it. My kids were saying, "Oh, that's woke," and it was positive.
Yeah, like you are awake and to the understanding that life isn't fair and maybe more fair for some people than others, and having an understanding of the history of that, and that what's wrong with that. I mean, to have a understanding of that history, whether it be American history, world history, and then it turned pejorative because it kind of went too far, at least in a lot of people's opinions, I would say. And now it's a pejorative term on the right. And if you're anti-woke, then people on the right seem to like you. But I think, what does anti-woke mean? I think just taking it too far. But what does taking it too far mean? Maybe I'll hand it to you because I'm still trying to figure.
Yeah, I think we're working something out. So this is cool because you see on the front end when it was positive, or to me it was like, oh, that's so woke, or you're so woke, you're aware of something. You're aware of maybe an injustice or an inequality that historically wasn't really recognized. So you were thoughtful, you were aware, right? And so taken too far, I think the tipping point is when a large group of people decide that there's a giant should in there. Not just like, hey, man, I'm glad you're aware, but now like you should this, you should that, when we're marginalized and we're mad. And so then, and what's interesting about shoulds is that these are balance concept of balance. So if you are dealing with a large group of people or a group of people who are saying you should, there's also blame in there. Like, you're a bad person because you didn't.
Oh yeah, that's key, really big. Yep.
Blame. And then the really big thing is if you lean too much into blame and shoulds, then let's say that group of people are living in serious victim energy. And it's like, and that's when you get to the anti-wokers who are just, and I tend to see the whole spectrum, but people who are too woke and they're just hanging their hat on that, it's just like it's a lot of belly aching and not really, they just want to live in that victimhood energy and not do anything about it and ask for to be treated or to be called a very specific thing. And then if you get it slightly wrong, it's like you're not doing it exactly right. By the way, this shit plays out in normal everyday relationships, right? So, and it can just be, let's just take it down to like partnership. If you have like a partnership where there's just like a lot of blame and there's not a lot of forgiveness and people aren't trying, then you really could, that person who's blaming, you really could stay in the energy because it gets comfortable where I can't believe you did this. How dare you? You should be doing it this way. You need to love me in a very specific way. And it's never good enough. It's a bottomless pit. So,
Oh man, dude, amen. And bravo. That was really well said. All of that. The relationship metaphor, I think, is really useful. But the danger of wokeism going too far is the victimhood. Because it's like you can have an understanding and an awareness that not everything is fair, but if you're living in the mindset of being a victim, then there's no hope for you to get out of your current state unless I think it comes down to choices. Even if you've been dealt a less fair hand than your neighbor, you still comes back to you to own your own future. And it's not about everybody else. But with a caveat, I was talking to my friend Chaz. He's kind of right there with you. Maybe we're all kind of very close, I think.
I bet we're pretty close, yeah.
But my buddy Chaz, the Megadeth guy who's touring with the ex-Megadeth guys.
Did you say 12?
12
in a row.
He did though say it's kind of like you have to caveat it with, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Take that phrase. That also is a little bit maybe insensitive to use as a wide net. While I agree, and I'm trying to think through and dissect the difference of victimhood bad because you're not taking ownership of your future, but then saying, hey, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps to like everybody. Because I think there are plenty of examples, even if they're not coming to mind immediately, of where some folks need some help.
If someone was marginalized in part or in large part by an external group, even though that was there was a huge injustice there, oftentimes for a person to really rehabilitate and to heal, they have to do some work on their own and self-rehabilitate, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, ideally with some help or just some sort of, help from the outside, maybe even that external source that did them wrong. And so, but that is so hard. And it's so hard to get out of the attitude of blame. Blame is so seductive. You can just live in blame. You can just take that to the grave. And that's your comfort. And that's your story.
Easy go to,
Easy go. It's an addiction, actually. Blame is an addiction. And because it's still, even, especially in the circumstance where someone else did you wrong, you didn't do anything to deserve that. But, I think about it as life giving you an opportunity to rise the F up and transform and become a stronger person.
Yeah, and this is what my response to him for that comment was, it's hard for me to relate because that's exactly what I had to do. I was a blamer for too long.
Yeah, me too.
And then it was when I realized that, okay, it's up to me. And then, okay, I need to make different decisions and different choices. I think my point earlier is more, and this is a very extreme example, but say someone in a Nazi death camp, World War II, you can't tell that person, hey, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
I know.
You need outside, and again, total extreme example, but you need that. There's still it still warrants outside help. It still warrants American forces coming in to stop
Yeah.
what's going on in that case. So I don't want to lose sight that there is a spectrum. And
Yes.
and I, and even in my own story, I had to make the decision that I own my own future, but I still needed to seek help. I seek help just like talking to you.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron, hey, what I feel behind financially and taking care of my family. In your experience, what do you think, what's a way to catch up? And then you introduced me to Bitcoin. How successful has
Yeah.
that been? I mean, is it maybe on a lesser extreme example? But in that case, I had to make a decision that no one else is going to do it for me. I still
Yes.
have to make it happen.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. It is a joint effort. It is interesting. But okay. So, yeah, wokeism. I think it's interesting. And really, not to get too political, but I do think it's interesting. You're just sort of seeing the tide shift. I do think that the Liberal Party, the Democrats they're going through a moment of reconstruction. In fact, I've seen it. Someone did a comparison where they compared this moment to the end of the 70s, which ironically today is it Jimmy Carter's funeral today.
Yeah, that's why I'm off and why we can meet right now.
Nice. And so, you just had the 70s. I love the 70s, but you've got the 70s. You basically, people are at the end of the 70s, people are still wounded from Vietnam. They're still feeling the sting of that. You had Jimmy Carter. He was a one-term president, and generally, very low approval. And in any event, you just sort of had a breakdown of the Democratic Party, and you had this moderate come in Ronald Reagan, who was California governor, once was a Democrat himself, moved himself to the Republican Party. So it was so you just sort of had this renewal, rebirth, and the Democrats didn't win a national election for 12 more years till Clinton. And that was a revival. That was a renewal. So I think it's an interesting moment where Trump is back in office, liberals and wokeism, and they hung their hat on a lot of that for a long time. They're reinventing themselves. Will it take 12 years? Likely not. I don't think it'll take. I love the two-party system. I'm an independent voter. I'm unaffiliated, but I just love that. So yeah, and now we've got Trudeau, who is resigning as just this secondary effect of they're hanging up their hats. Trudeau to me is ultimate woke. He's basically Gavin Newsom. So these guys are going, hey, this is not our time. We're resigning, licking our wounds. And I tell me if you agree with this. I don't know if you saw Trudeau's resignation speech, but my judgment, he's just dripping with this feeling of victim. He's embattled. There's this affected. So this is my judgment, but there's this affected. Um, there's this affective emotion, like he's feeling sorry for himself. I don't get it. I don't get Trudeau. So
yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I didn't watch the whole thing. I did watch bits and pieces, but now that you mention it, yes. And it's sort of, it's sort of lame too, right? It's like, how much did you believe in what you were fighting for in the first place if you're going to give up?
I like that.
And because right now it appears he's like, hey, we don't have a path forward, so I'm going to resign. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he's resigning because he's like, look, there's not a path forward, so clearly I'm not the effective leader you need. If that's the case, and that might even be noble, but I'm not sure. I mean, who knows? They're all narcissists, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. It does take a lot, high level of narcissism for any politician to make their way to the top. And, I think Trudeau had his moment, and I think he did a lot of great things, and he rose to power he rose to power in the wake of Obama. Didn't he feel like an extension of just the feel of Obama? And like I said, he feels like Gavin Newsom. And there's just, look, sunrise, sunset. I'm not with one side or the other, but you see the ebb and flow of different parties and ideas. And now you've got, just Trudeau as an example. You've got this conservative, his opponent is conservative Pierre Poilievre, who's this major pragmatic, gonna attack inflation. He's a pro-Bitcoin guy who likely will be the next prime minister. So again, the ebb and the flow and the back and the forth. And we're in an era of just the attack is, Trump-led pro-business capitalism, no nonsense. Let's stop being babies and let's stop feeling sorry for ourselves. I do think we're seeing the end of wokeism, and of course it's going to come back in a new form, in a new way of branding. But right now we're going to be, the United States of America pounding our chests, being gorillas and being just world dominant.
And I'll admit, there's something very alluring about that. It's funny because I think it was a Democratic campaign with Kamala Harris and everything. They did step away, I think, from the wokeism. You saw the American flags, pro-America at all these rallies, and I think they knew that was hurting them, but they didn't do enough. They didn't come out and against it outright.
I think they couldn't help.
They didn't talk about it anymore.
They just didn't. That's right. They just tried to move off of the language that pointed towards that. But my judgment is it was so imbued in them, they couldn't even help it. And then they tried to bring Obama in as this voice and didn't. Do you agree with me? He just felt outdated and tired. And he was wagging his finger at certain social groups. Again, and by the way, I loved Obama. I voted for Obama. I read his book and I was like, yeah. And there was a moment and a time for Obama. So I love it all. And I like just progressive ideas, but here we are. I mean, God, you've got Trump and Elon, and it's all, this whole idea about Greenland is so fascinating. Maybe we could switch into that because I've got a couple of ideas there.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, what's up with Greenland? Tell the people, Aaron.
Okay.
Well, are we gonna buy Greenland? Is Denmark actually gonna sell to us? Why does Trump want Greenland? You tell us.
Yeah, no. So this is Trump, an incredible capitalist. He's a deal maker, right? His autobiography is called The Art of the Deal. He hired a ghostwriter and they put it together. This dude is a deal junkie. He will talk with everyone. He will cut deals for the better, right? And then sometimes, it's a mixed bag. Okay. Look, you do something in deal making called anchoring. You ever tried to buy a car and it's like, or a house, and it's like, well, who's going to throw out the first offer? Well, I don't know. Because you realize the first offer, if you don't get it right, well, you just, whatever is said at first, that's where you start from. That's your anchor. So if Trump wants control over the melting Arctic Sea, that's what's really going on, right? Where there's so much more passage of commerce. In 1985, it was frozen. You couldn't run anything through there. Now you've got Russia and China all running. You save 40% of your cost if you can run goods through the Arctic Sea as it's now melted.
And
That's
that's
what we're
where
talking.
that's it. I didn't know that, and that's
This,
interesting because that's where the Panama Canal comes in too, right?
yeah, that's why he's putting it in the same conversation. So
Yeah.
if we can have more control, and by the way, if well, also Canada. So if you've got power and force and commerce up there, and by the way, you've got some army bases that are like, look, no one touches American ships as they cruise through our side, right? There's the Arctic Sea on the Russian side, and then there's the Arctic Sea on the Greenland, top of Canada side. It's all it's melting. It's just, this is world power. This is commerce. And so look, Trump, whether he wants to actually, I honestly do think he would love it if he made Greenland and Canada new states. He would love it. Now, but I don't think that's ultimately his goal. He starts with a crazy anchor.
I gotcha.
And then maybe if you could just fall back to something where it's like, hey, we started by, getting the craziest thing out there. And then over the next 10 years, starting there amounted to us having half a dozen army bases and rite of passage through there. Cool.
Yeah.
We accomplished a lot there,
Oh, that's well said. That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't even thought. I really haven't thought much about those comments at all, and wasn't really sure. What I was thinking? I was thinking, oh, he wants Greenland to drill. Maybe that's also true. But
also, there's a ton of natural resources that are untapped. There are mines there where we can get all kinds of stuff for precious metals for our phones and the like. And it's strategic, it's commerce. This dude is a businessman. And so I think it's smart. And people are like, again, wokeism are like, how dare he? And all of the natives that, okay, fine. I mean, there's 45,000 people on Greenland. Okay. So it's just,
that's the same population as Liechtenstein. You know how I know? Because I watched Jeopardy last night. So the population of Liechtenstein, which is this big on all of Greenland.
Well, and Greenland has an opinion of what they want. They want progress. They want commerce. They're talking with China. They're talking with Denmark, who is, it's sort of like a loose Commonwealth of Denmark. But no, it has new relevance now that we've dealt with global warming over the last several decades. And so that's really what we're talking about here. And, if you read the history of the Panama Canal, the United States, it wouldn't have existed if it weren't for the United States. So it is an interesting thing that we put so much into the building of the Panama Canal. And
what did we do? We built it and then sold it to Panama?
Yeah.
Is that how it worked?
I believe so. And I can't speak to how much control we have down there. I'm sure we're running loads of ships through there, but the fact that he wants that again is interesting.
That's a great way to help folks understand the anchor. I think is a really good way to describe his methods as part of deal making. Go big, and then hey, if you go big and hey, maybe you end up lower, but you still got what you really wanted in the first place.
Yeah, the first person to throw out the first price wins, especially if you go high. It's like, cool, we can just come down off that. Like, I like that price because I started there. So
tell me what you think of this. I think the responsibility of every president is to make sure and assert American dominance. in the world. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. Mostly for that's just the ABCs of running a nation state. You have to do what's in the best interest of the nation state, and it's in the best interest of America to maintain dominance for all kinds of reasons, security and all kinds of things. And I know a lot of people have problems with that and issues with that, but that's kind of what I think part of their job, their role description. And what I was going to say about that, even if whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I think with the Democrats, and I think Obama did it too. He did all kinds of things that were very conservative. Think of all the drone strikes and everything. I'm not defending drone strikes or pretend to know anything about that, but Obama also was trying to strengthen America, and I would say strengthen American dominance, but it was cloaked in the appearance of protecting, folks that historically identified as victims and whatnot. And maybe he did some good in that respect.
Hey, a bunch of you guys are watching the videos, but you're not subscribing. Please hit like and subscribe and help us break out this channel in 2025. And you'll get authenticity, you'll get dignity in the discourse, you'll get inspiration from those who overcame massive challenges to be successful where they are. More heavy metal, more politics in the radical middle, and more great content coming your way.
I keep coming back to this thought of Trump being the ugly truth versus the beautiful lie. Trump saying kind of what it is, like, hey, look, it's about, I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. We have to dominate. And whereas the beautiful lie is there's still Democrats will be working on the same kinds of things, but they cloak it and also maybe better at hiding maybe their nefarious ways at doing so. Any thoughts on that, or do you think I'm on the right track?
I know what you're talking about. It's interesting too. What is truth? What is truth? And to think that we all, I think, so if you zoom way out, you think about each of our conscious and individual experience, your truth versus my truth never completely lines up. But I think we're led to believe that it is, or it can, the general idea of how do I know that the same color yellow is the same color yellow that you are seeing? Or how do I know that the same flavor of salt is the same thing that you are experiencing? And where I'm going with that is I think that, there's, what did you call it? The beautiful truth or a beautiful truth. Lie versus the ugly truth. Yep. I think there's a good concept there. You could say, yeah, Trump versus wokeism. Trump is the ugly truth, just he says it like it is. And the beautiful lie is it's all, dressed up so that it's palatable. I think what's interesting is at what point did the Trump's ugly truth become also embellished and lies too? It's a paradox. To think that one person or party has all the truth and they're always the truthful one, I think that's one of the lies we tell ourselves. Like, I'm with the good guys, to always question. Always question.
No, absolutely. And I don't even know if I believe that. It's me trying to make sense of things, because obviously, Trump lies all the time.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes.
But there's some kind of truth, or maybe people see it on his side, see a truth behind it all that's compelling to them. And some of it I think we've already discussed. And I want to be clear too, I voted for Kamala Harris because to me, it was the deal. I've shared this with you. I think the big deal breaker was him going after the 11,780 votes in Georgia, and that was a very, to me, it's funny. Back to truth. I heard that recording of him and the I was the attorney general who counts the votes in Georgia, and I heard it as him, "Hey, find me these votes," meaning make it up if you have to, so I can win. Other people hear that call and say, "Hey, no, he just genuinely thought there was fraud and wanted to get to the bottom of it." I don't believe that. But then again, I also think that I bet Democrats, and maybe are better at getting away with it, have probably engaged in something similar that I would be a line in the sand for me as well. Now, I don't know that, but I suspect it. And so that's why I'm kind of like, that's where radical middle comes in.
Yeah.
And kind of understanding and being reasonable about my outlook on both sides.
I think we have the capacity for all things within us, including the most, magnanimous moments and the most ugly, literally evil deeds. We have it all within us. We are infinitely complex creatures. And so to see Trump is an absolute narcissist. And Trump, with J6, I think that he exerted and showed some parts of himself that were extremely narcissistic and corrupt. I'll even say it. And so I watched a video that it compared, and so I think there's parts of Trump that can get that ugly and that bad, right? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. I think he is he is no exception to that. And so, he's just kind of like, what does he have within him? And, I even understand the approach of like, well, he showed me that, like you said, the 11,000 votes. He showed me that. I don't trust him anymore. And I understand that. I understand that. And then I just decided that I trust the system. Even in his worst moments, Trump actually couldn't pull that off. That's our checks and balances. And so here we are back. He's got 4 years. In 2 years, he'll be a lame duck president. But I think I trust that 4 years more of this president, he's going to be a catalyst for a lot of things. And I'm not going to agree with everything he does. Certainly not everything he says. He's crazy. But I think we need some big energy, and we need to take some chances to move us forward. And I love a guy who, when I've told you this too, the thing I love about, I'm a businessman. And so the thing I love about Trump is he is a pure capitalist, and he's not a politician. And the thing that I love about Trump is he is not establishment. He really really doesn't belong to any political party. He's just, we elected a New York real estate baron who is crazy, and he's talented, and he's like effed over women, lots of them. And he's like, just, the dude's a wild and crazy deal maker. He's the guy. Do you ever work with people or friends who are like, ooh, they're crazy, but I'm glad they're on my team?
Yeah.
Glad they're
my
my
dad
friend.
says, he's like, he may be a son of a bitch, but he's my son of a bitch.
Yeah. And I do believe in the checks and balances. I think there are a lot of people around him that don't agree with his terrible parts, but they do like progress. And that's why we have, Tulsi Gabbard. That's why we have Elon and Vivek. I might have voted for Vivek over Trump if those two were head to head. That's, and that's another concept, but.
Well, yeah, maybe we could talk about that. I have some opinions on him, but let me say this. I'm choosing to feel positive for many of the reasons you said. And I also part of that optimism I'm having now is related to Trump being old, because the fear before was that
He's old.
he's old, and I think he wants a really surviving legacy. Now, I could be wrong about this. A lot of times people think they're never going to die. He might be in that category. Or he's like, he wants to go down in history as the best president ever. And so he, in his last chance at it, wants to do some big moves. And we can go through some of those. The strategic Bitcoin reserve, if there's something resembling that comes into place and it knocks out the debt or a big chunk of it, how amazing would that be? I'm totally optimistic about that, and excited about that. But back to your point about the systems did its job and kept him in check. Where I worry, and why I didn't vote for him too, is because I thought maybe he would have learned his lessons of how he couldn't get what he wanted the first term. And now he's putting in place extreme loyalists to replace those who pushed back on him before. And that's where I think it gets a little scary. And if he is in the other category and not in the one I'm feeling optimistic about, meaning, hey, he thinks he's going to live forever and he'll want to stay president, another 4 years after this and changing the laws, that maybe he won't get as much resistance because he's being more strategic about positioning loyalists and to Trump the system, where the system won't mitigate that like it did last time. That's a concern of mine.
Yeah, we will see. This idea of loyalists. I think if you're Trump or anyone, actually, if you're anyone and you really want to put loyalists in place, you're going to choose people who really aren't that amazing. And really, because they're a little bit mindless and they're just going to follow Trump. And I think he's got a lot of really big, talented human beings who are like, F that. Like, I think any one of, like I said, Tulsi, Vivek, or Elon, any one of those guys could defect because they have enough of their self-knowing and wherewithal, because that's the thing. They're not just a bunch of yes men.
And Elon is I guess Vivek too, but Elon is probably okay with if he has to say F you at the end of the day. I mean, he already has all the power anyway.
He's arguably more powerful than Trump.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very, very good argument, actually. So
maybe even Vivek. I don't know what his worth is.
There's a lot of power in the office of the president of the United States. In a lot of ways, a lot of power. But in a lot of ways, he is also a figurehead. And there are a lot of dark forces. I call them dark because they're unseen and unknown. Call it deep state, big pockets, big money, military industrial complex, or big pharma. Incredible money that comes in and says to the president in the Oval Office, nah, you're not going to do that. And they go, okay.
Well, yeah, that'll be interesting with Doge, right? Because this Department of Government Efficiency that's already working and already soliciting information, by the way. I know it is with the agency I work
love
with.
That.
But that is an interesting topic too. Maybe we can go in there a little bit. Because what's going to happen, like if they're doing their job as they say they're going to do it, and they go after, my assumption is they go after DOD first, which has been the most prolific in failing, prolific maybe the wrong word, but in failing audits about money going nowhere, nobody knows. And all these contracts.
Trillions of unaccounted for money. Yeah. So much.
And so what happens if they go after that stuff? What do those big time contractors, how do they respond? Who are going to lose tons of money. Lockheed Martin, the company I work for, which I'm not going to say, Boeing, all the big contractors out there, Deloitte, the big four. How are they going to respond if their businesses are diminished? Because I see it too. Like, a lot of times I'm a government contractor. I come in and I solve problems, but I think all the time, why aren't they just solving their own problems?
Yeah.
Why do they need us? And I think Doge is going to come to similar conclusions. And then what happens to those big money companies? What are they going to do?
I think it's going to be fascinating. I think, first of all, Doge, this is an endeavor that really it's like making history. It's never really been done before. But I think Doge is going to come across a lot of stuff that is either bureaucratic, and they're like, oh God, they're going to have to, and I'm glad Elon has a say in it, but they're going to have to assess, not just what should we go after, but what is our money, time and efforts best put towards, because they might just run into a buzzsaw that is either bureaucratic or shrouded in top secrecy, that kind of thing. I think that I do think there's a lot of corruption and a lot of omitted information. Oh, and then the other thing that Doge is going to run into is, what will they actually disclose to the public? That, if you give these things long enough, they're just going to become like the rest of the government agencies. I think it's just a matter of the way that's just how it goes. And that probably reflects my pessimism. But I do think of that. So
I'm surprised your pessimism of Doge.
Yeah. I think I love the endeavor and I'm pumped about it. And I do think they're going to run into a lot of bureaucracy. A lot. But see what I'm saying? It's a worthwhile endeavor and it's amazing. First time in history they've really talked about this. But I do think I bet, well, in 10 years, Doge is going to be a mixed bag, but it's still worth doing,
Yeah.
Because government just wants to get bigger. Government just wants to get bigger. And by the way, ironically, paradoxically, that's also what this is too. It's a new government agency or a new endeavor, new funding. So,
do you know what's interesting though? And I always thought government always needed to get bigger, just like a business always has to grow. I did recently come across a stat, and I don't remember the source, so take that for what you want. But that government hasn't increased personnel in the last 10 years. Apparently, that's a stat. So that surprised me. I thought for sure that they had, and it doesn't account for maybe contractors, because there's probably more contractors. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting that maybe it's not inflating, at least how I thought it was inflating. But still, there's a lot. I'm sure there's tons of fat that I'm sure could be trimmed.
Yeah.
It's funny too. I did write relatively, maybe right before the holidays, Substack on optimism about Trump being elected, and I go into Doge and Elon and Vivek. I remember my sister was, I think, disgusted about it. Love you, Amy. But because I said, hey, these guys are pros at cutting out the fat. And so that should be a positive thing. Because why do we don't want fat in the government if we can help it. So why not hire the pros to come in and clean it out? Because they have to clean it out to run a business and be successful. So why not? They probably are the best people for that job.
Yeah, I see that. It was cool. I was listening to Mark Andreessen on Rogan, just talking about some of his overall. So Elon's going to attack it like a businessman. Look what he did with Twitter. He cut out thousands and thousands of employees, and Twitter didn't miss a beat as far as the consumer is concerned. And it's like, what were all of you guys doing? And so the the government is bloated to the max as far as efficiency with spending our tax dollars to run the government. And so, Mark Andreessen was just talking about, look, just COVID, you had to send everyone home. And if you do an audit on the government, 2/3 of those people didn't come back. They're like, what companies actually did bring it back to the office? That's a really good study.
Oh yeah,
And
well, that's
most
a
of the
big,
government just stayed home. So
that's a big concern right now. I can tell you firsthand. Everybody's worried. If you're a government employee, everybody's worried about having to go back. And I know a person that recently changed jobs so that they could work, because they always have to fly out here from somewhere. I don't want to get too specific. And they're very, cause the whole reason for changing jobs was to be home as opposed to having to fly here. And that might all not work for that person. It's not the same for contractors, because like my schedule is dictated by my company. So they're not required to be in, but they may change their policy. I go in anyway 3 days a week, but they may change their policy to align with government if that's what's coming.
whether that's efficient or not, but Tesla, for example, was famous for 18 months ago was like, everyone get back to work. We need to see you in the office. And it was a big press release, and I'm sure there was 80,000 groans, and then off they go. Because that dude, Elon is a ruthless businessman. So it's
weird because I'm insanely productive when I work at home. I'm insanely productive. Mondays and Fridays I work from home, and that's just me. And maybe the statistics, or maybe there's data on other folks where they're not, or maybe they blow off work or whatever.
Right.
I don't really know. So maybe the data is overwhelming, and maybe I'm an anomaly. But
that's a good question.
Because 2 hours are wasted. Not 2 hours. An hour of the day is wasted driving there and driving back. Where I'd be working.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And technology allows us to be able to do this or work on Zoom.
Yeah. And show our neon sign.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the first. You're my first interview with this, by the way.
Dude, it turned out amazing.
It's pretty cool, huh? We're still thinking it through, or I'm still thinking through. I had grandiose plans of redoing my basement to be more kind of like what you got there.
What do you think about the alien stuff? Have you paid attention to that?
Aliens. I think it's mind blowing for the last year, maybe 2 years, that basically everybody's confirming that there's aliens and people's minds aren't exploding. We're just like, really? Okay. And
there's like this,
what Trump said last night.
Yeah. There's it's almost like collective millennial yawn. I'm just blaming the millennials. But the collective yawn is interesting because I think here's what I think. We see so much on social media, and I think if they just keep showing, the glowing orbs of plasma in the sky, I honestly think it's going to be normalized. And by the way, 2 years ago, just various leaders on Congress and just in the world started to legitimize the possibility of aliens. I do think there is a normalization. It's interesting. I've never been a big UFO alien guy, but I'm open. I think consciousness is just a magical experience. Everything's possible. I think we're in a simulation. So yes, aliens are possible. And our aliens, I believe in swirling spirits and angels and extra dimensional, insight. Multi-dimensions happening at the same time. So what are aliens? To me, it's like an extra dimensional concept.
I
And
agree.
so,
Yeah, angels and demons, I think,
yeah,
can be explained that way. And um, call it what you want. I guess if you have to give
yeah,
it a name, then go ahead, give it a name and justify it to yourself however you want. Um, I I think I am leaning towards like the alien thing. Have you ever watched Billy Carson? Do you know who that guy is?
yeah. That dude, he's brilliant.
He's
Yes, I have.
intense, and I think
Yep.
brilliant. I think he's onto something. I think he's getting a lot of power and attention, and I wonder if that can corrupt as it may everybody.
Sure.
But I mean, I think it makes sense, and like just how he explains biblical stories
Yeah.
in terms of alien stuff. It's funny because my my thought to Christians out there, which is where I come from, who can't reconcile Jesus Christ and their belief system with aliens. To me, I say it doesn't matter. I say whether even if
Right.
Jesus Christ was an alien, how does that change anything? To
Yeah.
me, it doesn't. I think, and it's the same kind of thing I say. Taking the Bible literally or symbolic. It doesn't. What's so important about it having to be literal all the time? I mean, I think maybe a lot of it is, and maybe more so, and surprisingly so. But even if it's just symbolic, it's not merely symbolic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's to me, it's still all of it's still very powerful, and some of it, whether it's true or not, and
Yeah.
and I am leaning kind of towards like the whole idea of aliens coming down, and his whole thing is like they changed our DNA to be. What was it? We were like Neanderthalish or something. That might be
Yeah.
the wrong term, but then they changed our DNA to be a little smarter, or something.
Yeah. Billy Carson, like before. This is where I go into we don't know our history past 5,000 years, right? What is it, 15-20,000 years ago? The Anunnaki, they were the ones who built the pyramids. They were super beings. They weren't human. They weren't Neanderthal, but that they actually left our Earth, and really the human race, Homo sapiens, are a very young, uncivilized race. But somehow the Anunnaki, don't quote me on this, but they were the ones who bred us, and here we are. So
yeah, there's something in that story where they changed our DNA to be a little smarter, but then we built the Tower of Babel, that whole Tower of Babel thing. They're like, oh wait, this is them. They could become more powerful than us if we're not careful. So let's change them again, so they're segregated and can't work together as well. And that's why you have different races. Is his whole thing. It's like, because we can't have them collaborate like they're doing now. So let's destroy the Tower of Babel, and then let's put this other tweak in their DNA and make them different colors and have different languages so that they can't collaborate and become more powerful than us, is the way he explains some of that background.
The two ideas, they're almost three ideas that I'm working in, because I believe that these are real. What everyone's seeing in the skies are real. I haven't personally seen any of these, but I do think we're headed towards a period where we will soon, everyone will at least know someone who's seen something in the sky, orbs of plasma, drones, whatever you want to call it, that can't be explained. And then there will be a time when it's very common that you will have seen it as a supernatural thing, maybe to the level of like, have you seen the Northern Lights? Yeah, I've seen the Northern Lights. That'll be that common. Like, I've seen it. I've seen the orbs then. And so they will be normalized, maybe still unexplained. But the question is, what is this? What are all of these things in our skies? They're all so different, and so I think that I think they can morph into various things. I do think I like the idea of extra dimensional. Like, for example, so I'm just open, right? I think that this life simulation, this path of consciousness is just magical. So everything's possible.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next in the movie? Possibly everything, anything. Who knows?
How
And
beautiful is that too?
Yeah. Well, you can just live in wonder and just be like, wow, oh, wow, wow, wow. So, but there's a couple of camps. One is that this is actually still a military psyop that actually there's a guy named Stephen Greer. He goes on Rogan a lot. You've seen him.
Yeah.
But he's on the side of, hey, aliens and UFOs have been crash landing in all over the world for decades and decades, especially since we started blowing up the atomic bomb and sort of disrupting the universe with that, and it sort of brought the aliens, and they've just been, and so with all those crash landing and just various encounters we've had with them, U.S. military has been able to confiscate a lot of that tech, and over the last many decades has created our own anti-gravity technology that we use, and it's being farmed out to Lockheed Martin and the like, and it's just they use that, and it's super deep undercover, like not like a typical Air Force fighter pilot will see that in the air. They don't even have clearance to understand what it is. So there's that side. I tend to believe that, actually.
That's what Stephen Greer's saying.
That's Stephen Greer, and there's a whole, growing amount of people who have witnessed various versions of there's a couple of people who have worked on those projects, and now they're declassified and talking, and being attacked for it anyway. So there's that. Stephen Greer now says these orbs in the sky aren't the actual UFOs, but that they are a government psyop using the government, and so that they're going to try to do something on maybe on the level of a pandemic. So something scary where the government, or where they can sort of seize more control and maybe remake our financial system with CBDCs or something like that. So,
oh, really? Well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's scary.
Yeah, like, hey, internet outage, crazy things are happening. What's going on in our skies? And people go through something painful like the pandemic, and then they say, we'll save you. We have to reset the dollar, and we're going to start by giving CBDCs in your bank account. These are a lot of big ideas, a lot of doom and gloom. There's someone else called Whitney Webb who's saying that there's a lot of that going on. So that's interesting. And then there's the side where I do tend to think that we are being observed by extraterrestrials, extra dimensionals. I think that's an interesting idea. A lot of people say that their encounters with these extraterrestrials, that they surmise that they are the human race that has evolved many countless eons ahead of us.
Yeah,
and
interstellar.
It's an interstellar idea, and that they are observing us as a really archaic, savage race. They don't understand attacking and killing. And so, and my idea that I put on top of that is, why don't we just have open contact? Is that this is where I go woo-woo, but they want to observe us and become more normalized, because they don't want to disrupt the timeline if they are evolved from us. Or does that make sense?
Yeah.
If they come back, if they come back and it causes a nuclear war and we kill ourselves, then that will affect them moving forward. So these are the ideas that I think of when I'm in the sauna meditating at the gym. So
Well, that's great. Well, maybe we end with more questions, Aaron. More questions out there for people to think about. I think, talking to you, there can be part 2, 3, 4, 5,
yeah,
part 6.
let's do it.
Yeah, man. I love this discussion. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to think about some of those things today. That's interesting. It's funny because I just heard this. I was just watching this guy from like the 50s, an old video of him saying, there is no past. Try to go back to the past. You think you're thinking of the past, but it's not, you can't go there.
Yeah.
Try to go to the future. He's like, there's just now. And so that we needed to focus on that. So that now for maybe a few, that now could has room for an evolved human that's observing us, that knows how to manipulate the illusion of past and future and present to make sure that we don't screw it up for them. I don't know. I'll have to think more about
I have a lot of thoughts about that too, but we have now is the only time that ever exists, but there are actually infinite timelines. There are infinite future timelines, there are infinite past timelines. It's almost like just a very intricate lattice of possibility that we navigate. Quick pinpoints of reality, literally creating it instantaneously. This is a projected hologram of reality.
And maybe we're even transcending to different parts of it. I sometimes think that too. Like if I'm down in the dumps, sometimes I feel like I'm transporting my whole life experience into a lower dimension. And then when I'm on top of it, because I'm making good choices, blah, 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 I'm transporting myself to maybe a higher dimension altogether where everybody's happy. Everybody's doing good. Because it's interesting.
Dude. So that's it. We have the capability of so if we're infinite spirits beyond this, gods, beyond and outside of this dimension, we can navigate ourselves to any vibration dimension. So if you and I are existing in a very prosperous, positive, expansive world, you and I have chosen to be on this timeline together, and we are manifesting that experience together. Everything's possible. So
I think that's a good note to end on.
Everything's possible.
Everything's possible. Live in wonder, viewers.
Yeah.
Live in wonder. I love that part.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
I know. Well, hey, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Let's do this again.
Absolutely. But thanks again, Aaron. You're the best. Thanks for being a friend, my friend.
Yes, likewise.